Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. You call this a D-level ability. Chapter 21. Hey, little brother. Seeing that Shu Yi was really about to leave, the stall owner finally couldn't bear it anymore and quickly called him to stop. Shu Yi turned around and asked confused, "What's wrong?" Ahem. The stall owner coughed twice and showed the broken sword in his hand, although this broken sword is a treasure passed down from my ancestors. But I think you are quite interested in him, little brother. Then I will reluctantly give up my love today. As long as you give me a suitable price, little brother, I will sell it to you. He pretended to be reluctant to give up his love, held the broken sword in his hands, and showed it to Shu Yi. Actually, I'm not that interested. Shu Yi looked at the other party with empty eyes. However, he still pretended to go back and took the broken sword in his hand to examine it. Since you said so, boss, give me a price. This broken sword has been passed down in my family for thousands of years. Today I met Master Ming, and I entrust him to you. The stall owner's lie came out without any embarrassment. I think you and I are destined, little friend. For 2,000 dragon coins, I will sell you this family heirloom. You're so embarrassed to ask for 2,000 dragon coins. Shu Yi twitched the corner of his mouth, knowing a little about the tricks of these traders. Without raising his eyes, he said directly, "One price, 10 dragon coins." The stall owner was stunned and his scalp was numb. Although the price of 2,000 dragon coins is definitely exaggerated, are you too daring to bargain? The knife cut me 1,999, and it was aimed at the aorta. He looked at Shu Yi with a smile, and said with a dry smile, "Brother, even if you go out and buy scrap metal, the price will not be more than this. Let's do this. I'll bear the pain and give you a knife, and you'll get 1,000 dragon coins, and you take it away." "No, just 10 dragon coins." Shu Yi couldn't get enough of it and bit him to death. "If you buy this kind of treasure for 10 dragon coins, wouldn't you be destroying my stall?" The stall owner was also a little anxious. "I will chop you up again, at least 300 dragon coins, if you don't buy it, forget it." Quote. Shu Yi finally experienced firsthand the methods of these profiteers. "I had previously returned 2,000 dragon coins, but in just a few breaths I had cut down to 300. This is obviously profitable." He took a deep breath, his eyes suddenly became sharper, and he looked at the stall owner. "Some of the things you have here are just unearthed. Brother, why can't I understand what you are talking about?" The stall owner's temples jumped suddenly, his expression changed for a moment, and he quickly squeezed out a smile. This, and that." Shu also ordered some broken porcelain at the stall with a calm expression. "There is dirt on the bottle, and it has not been completely dried. The mud comes from the same place as the wet dirt on the sides of your shoes, and there are a few osmanthus petals on your feet. In the past week, it has only rained once in the outer suburbs in the west of the city, and in the outer suburbs there is only one place where laurel trees are planted. Wet soil, osmanthus petals, and a few porcelain stained with soil. The only ones that can meet these conditions are the ancient tombs in the outer suburbs. There is a callus between your index finger and middle finger. This should be left over from using some tools." His tone was calm, but it sounded like thunder in the vendor's ears, causing sweat to break out on his forehead and he couldn't help but swallow. Shu Yi raised his eyes lightly, looked at the other party, and said calmly, "You should have rushed here to set up a stall not long after you came out of the robbery cave." What are you talking about?" The vendor kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with his sleeves and looked around in a panic, for fear that someone would hear Shu Yi's words. "You should know that going to a grave privately is an act of tomb robbing and will be punished." Shu ignored the other party's excuses and just continued to speak aggressively. But he changed the topic and smiled, "But don't worry, I won't report you. I am indeed somewhat interested in this broken sword. Okay, I'll pay 50 dragon coins and you sell it to me. I can pretend I didn't see anything just now." He had full confidence, and through this coercion and inducement, he was able to get the broken sword cheaply. Unexpectedly, after hearing his bid, the merchant's eyes widened and he quickly put the broken sword into Shu Yi's hand, as if he was afraid that he would regret it. "It's a deal." In his eyes, there was a hint of secret joy and a look of surviving the disaster. Shu also noticed this look, and immediately twitched the corner of his mouth and cursed in his heart. "Damn it, I still lost money." Boom. The door of the rental house was pushed open by Fang Xin. She angrily threw the breakfast she bought on the table and sat down on the bed. Sister Shin, what's wrong with you? Did you step on poop when you went out? Guo Yan raised his head, tilted his head and complained. You just stepped on poop. Fang Shin punched him angrily, his eyes fierce. Guo Yan was in pain and immediately covered his head and looked to one side aggrievedly. Senior, look at Sister Shin, she is simply a violent woman. Who told you to be in debt over there? Cao Sha yawned and walked out of the toilet, wiped the water on his face casually, and asked calmly, Fang Shin, did anything happen to you when you went out? Fang Shin slapped the table angrily and said in a direct tone, the target of Shumo is number 3 middle school. Huh. As soon as these words came out, the other 3 people were stunned and looked confused. Then, Fang Shin's mouth was like a machine gun, and he quickly recounted Shu Yi's previous analysis. The expressions of Cao Sha and the 3 of them changed from confusion at the beginning, to solemnity, and finally to shock. When she finished telling her story, Guo Yan jumped up from his chair, extremely surprised. Sister Shin, when you went out, did you get hit by an apple and your brain opened up? These analyses are intertwined. Although they are not as sure as Shu Yi, they are still 70% sure that they can determine the target of the virtual demon's attack. Fang Shin, did you come up with this conclusion by yourself? Cao Sha asked a little excitedly, his breathing a little short. Nonsense, of course it's me. Fang Shin stood with his arms crossed and pouted. But soon, 3 pairs of eyes, including Sha Li's, narrowed slightly and stared at her suspiciously. Well, it's not me. Fang Shin curled his lips with a grimace, and finally sighed, it was the high school student who deduced it yesterday. I just met him downstairs. She briefly told the process of meeting Shu Yi, but did not tell the conflict between the two. That guy is indeed a genius. Cao Sha didn't dwell on it too much. He just sighed in admiration. Then he quickly returned to the table and drew a red circle around the west of the city with a pen. If his reasoning is correct, that virtual demon must be hiding in this area. Guo Yan, pass this conclusion to the technical department and ask them to call the city surveillance in the west of the city. Within today, we must find out all the places where the virtual demon may be hiding and find him. The world in a pot. Shu Yi looked at the broken sword in his hand that he bought with a huge investment of 50 yuan, and asked with some doubt, can such a broken sword really become a jubao after being refined? Then you underestimate the power of Julie Hu. Mr. Hu looked confident at the moment, stroking his beard and smiling softly. If it is a complete Julie pot, let alone jubao. Elixir, puppet architecture, anything you want can be refined. You can even refine your soul into a doll and build a house in this world in a pot. Although the Julie pot is in an incomplete state now, it is still very easy to refine an incomplete jubao. Everything that is just incomplete can be described as lavishly described by you. Shu Yi looked sideways at Hu Lao and complained. Okay, stop talking nonsense and start refining directly. He simply sat cross-legged on the ground, wanting to see with his own eyes how Mr. Hu refined the broken sword. Hu Lao cleared his throat and his expression immediately became solemn. He pointed at the broken sword on the ground, and the broken bronze sword quickly floated up. Then, a ball of extremely pure fairy mist immediately emerged from the body of the pot where he was living. This fairy mist kept deforming and condensing in the air, and finally turned into something like a refining furnace. Under the guidance of Mr. Hu, broken sword was quickly sucked into the mist. Then, he waved his right palm, and a light blue light came rushing from a distance. Shu Yi could tell at a glance that there was a vague appearance of the shadow beast from yesterday in this aura, and he immediately understood that this was the soul of the shadow beast that Julie Hu had swallowed. The shadow beast's soul was sucked into the item refining furnace, and soon the pure white fairy mist was dyed blue. Afterwards, the refining furnace began to glow with blue light, and the body of the pot seemed to be ignited with flames and began to burn blazingly. Shu just sat cross-legged on the ground, supporting his head and watching the furnace burn. About half an hour passed. The weapon refining furnace condensed with fairy mist suddenly stopped burning. 2 seconds later, the item refining furnace suddenly exploded in the air, and a section of the sword fell straight from the air and was inserted into the soil at his feet. Ha! The old man looked exhausted, his whole body slumped on the edge of the Julie pot, and he wiped the non-existent sweat on his head. I'm really exhausted. Look, little friend, if there are no mistakes, this broken sword should have been refined into a jubao. Shu Yi jumped up from the ground, picked up the broken sword inserted into the ground, and held it in his hand, with a trace of surprise in his eyes. The broken sword, which was originally rusty and extremely mutilated, now looked as brand new as if it had just been forged. The hilt of the sword is engraved with graceful patterns. The sword body is extremely sharp, but it has extremely obvious fractures. The original rust had long since disappeared, and the sword was so smooth that it could reflect Shu Yi's handsome face. The refining function of Julihu is difficult to reshape a broken sword into its entirety. The old man's voice sounded from not far away. Although by using the soul of the virtual beast as a binder, the energy in the sword body is refined and turned into a Ju treasure. But this energy is very weak, and it can hardly exert the power of Ju Bao. It can only be regarded as a defective product. He was also very confused as to why Shu Yao had to refine such a useless thing. But Shu Yi's expression moved slightly, as if he had his own thoughts, looking back and forth at the sword in his hand. The broken sword, which was only half the length of a forearm, was unexpectedly heavy. After a moment, he casually said, "Can the refining function of Julipot be used to refine things that do not contain energy?" "What do you want to refine?" "Refining a scabbard for this broken sword." Hu Lao rolled his eyes and waved his right palm. Several oars flew from afar and floated in his palm. The fog enveloped it, and the oar immediately deformed. A few minutes later, a scabbard that could hold the broken sword was refined. This function is much better than a 3D printer. Shu Yi's eyes lit up. He took the scabbard and put it into his pocket. "So, little friend, what do you want to do?" Hu Lao couldn't restrain his curiosity and finally asked. "Didn't I say it before?" Shu Yi held the broken sword in his right hand, and a pure white energy instantly enveloped the sword. "I want to try it out and repair the characteristics of my hand." The repair hand began to operate under his control. In an instant, the broken sword body suddenly changed. Then, a wave of pure energy rushed out of the sword body in an instant. After noticing this fluctuation, Mr. Hu suddenly opened his eyes wide with an expression of disbelief, and exclaimed, "How is it possible? Is this possible? Time flies by, and in the blink of an eye, a night passes quickly. It's 4:30 in the morning. As a city in the north of the Dragon Kingdom, even in summer, the night sky at this time is still pitch black. And somewhere on the roof of a building, 3 figures stood side by side, quietly waiting for something. Suddenly, the 3 of them seemed to sense something, and they all turned their heads and looked behind them. The light blue robe dances under the night sky. Cao Sha tapped her toes and fell from the air, but as light as a butterfly and without making any sound. He skillfully inserted the headset into his ear and said calmly, "The final location has been investigated. According to the screening conducted by the technical department, in the past 10 days, suspicious persons have appeared in the west of the city, and there are 5 places where virtual demons are suspected to be hidden. We have now checked all the other 4 locations, leaving only this last location." His gaze penetrated the night sky and looked straight at a bungalow at his feet. This is a village in the city, sparsely populated, and almost all young people go out to work. There were 2 elderly people living in this house, but they never left the house about 8 days ago. Now it seems that they must have been poisoned by the virtual demon. Damn void demon. After hearing this, the expressions of the other 3 people were condensed, and a strong murderous intent emerged in their eyes. "How is the layout of the mirror world?" Cao Sha asked calmly. "The arrangements have been completed a long time ago." Guo Yan quickly replied, "Our battle here will not affect any civilians. Lock the coverage area to that bungalow." Cao Sha nodded slightly, his hair fluttering in the night wind, revealing his deep and cold eyes. "For this operation, Fang Xin will be on standby outside, while Guo Yan, Sha Li and I will enter the mirror world to fight." Fang Xin curled his lips, and although he was a little dissatisfied, he still nodded honestly. "Very well, the action begins." Cao Sha gave the instructions calmly, and then jumped down from the roof, like a javelin, falling straight towards the bungalow at his feet. On both sides of him, Guo Yan and Sha Li also jumped down together, their expressions calm and without any disturbance. And just as they jumped off the roof, Fang Xin, who was still standing on the roof of the building, also put his 10 fingers together with a serious expression, making a triangular hole in front of his chest. Light red energy surged from the hollow, and then 4 strands of energy rose together in the 4 corners of the urban village, quickly turning into a square and transparent barrier, covering this area in the night sky. Jubao, world in the mirror. In an instant, the village and the city was covered by the mirror world. From the outside, everything here is business as usual, almost unchanged from before. But its interior has long been separated into 2 unique spaces. No matter how fierce the battle is, it will be difficult to affect the nearby buildings and people. HMPH, they actually asked me to stay outside on the grounds that my injury has not healed. Fang Xin sat gently on the roof of the building, his calves swinging casually, his eyes full of dissatisfaction. But Cao Sha, as the captain of their 5th hunting team, must abide by his orders as a member of the team. And with the lessons learned from the past, she must also prevent the world in the mirror from being broken from the outside, thereby affecting nearby residents. Just as Fang Xin was resting his chin on his hands and looking at the night boredly, a cell phone ringing suddenly came from his chest. She opened her chest, put her hand in and took it out. She quickly took out her phone and pressed the call button. Hello. As soon as she opened her mouth, a hurried voice came from the other end of the phone. Sister Xin, I finally found out what you asked me to investigate. There was a young man's voice on the other end of the phone. His tone was excited, but there was a bit of fatigue in his voice. In order to help you find this information, I went to the information section to search for a long time. Ha, good job. Fang Xin suddenly looked happy when he heard this. When my sister comes back, I will treat you to a good meal. Ha ha. The young man laughed dryly, as if he didn't have any hope for this promise. I just hope you can let me have a good sleep and don't wake me up again. I have packaged all the information and sent it to your mobile phone. You can just check it yourself. But Sister Xin, why are you so interested in an adult high school student? Could that guy be my future brother-in-law? Beep. Fang Xin hung up the phone with force and stared at the phone screen fiercely. Brother-in-law, when we get back, see how I deal with you. While muttering, she quickly found the file sent by the boy and quickly opened it. In this document, Shu Yi's personal information was recorded. Age, life history. Almost as if he was screening the household registration book, Fang Xin quickly read this information, but in the end his eyes suddenly stopped at one place and froze slightly. At the end of the document, a line of dark red text was written. The survivors of the Haicheng Rebellion have witnessed virtual beasts and have completed psychological counseling. Close black lens bracket. The timestamp of this piece of information was surprisingly 3 years ago. Sure enough, that guy has encountered a void beast before. Fang Xin's expression condensed and he immediately glanced at another document in the document package. That was about a detailed record called Haicheng Rebellion, 3 years ago. She quickly opened the file and read line by line. A few minutes later, Fang Xin's expression became extremely heavy, and there was even anger in his eyes, and he squeezed his phone tightly. No wonder that guy is so disappointed with the Void Hunter. 3 years ago, this happened to him. Suddenly, her expression changed slightly, and she suddenly lowered her head and looked at her feet. Although the energy fluctuation is only fleeting. But she understood that this energy was only possessed by the Void Demon. This also means that the virtual demon is indeed hiding here. And the seniors and others have already come into contact with the virtual demon. You are here. In the slightly old bungalow, a man dressed in black stood with his hands behind his back, quietly looking at Cao Sha and the other 2 people walking in from the door. His tone was calm, and he seemed to be indifferent to the appearance of these people. Not surprisingly. It seems like you knew we were coming. Cao Sha also spoke calmly, looking directly at the other party. Virtual Demon, Night Dyer. Night Dyer, is this the code name you gave me? It's not that unpleasant. Night Dyer smiled faintly and accepted the title calmly. But there's something wrong with what you said. He looked at Cao Sha with a smile, not caring about Guoyan and Sha Li who had quietly surrounded him. Didn't I know you were coming? But we have already made preparations that you might come here. Being able to find this place shows that you are not too stupid. You seem to be a thoughtful guy. Cao Sha didn't take it seriously and just smiled lightly. Since you like to prepare so much, why did you end up like this? Hearing this, Nightmare's eyes clearly flashed with displeasure, but she just snorted. It's very common for plans to go a little awry. If we only look at the results, I have killed all those void hunters. I can still vividly remember the tragic situation before their death. At this point, his expression became a little cruel. But Cao Sha's expression suddenly darkened. You shouldn't insult them. His right palm unfolded, and a Tang Dao appeared out of thin air and landed in his palm. A fierce momentum rose from his body, and the dim lights in the room seemed to sense this momentum and began to sway continuously. I don't care what kind of preparation you have made. There is only one ending for you today, and that is to die here. Nightmare stretched out her right hand slightly behind her back, making a please gesture, with a half-smile expression on her face. I'll wait and see. Jet black energy surged out of his body, like an exploding smoke bomb, covering the entire house in an instant. As the alarm clock set at 7 o'clock rang, Shuyi rarely stayed in bed. Instead, he sat up from the bed with a sudden jerk. The graduation ceremony is very important to every awakened person. Even Shuyi didn't want to be late on this day. He quickly tidied up, then walked out of the house lazily holding the bread in his mouth. And just as he walked out of the house, a figure hidden behind the tree looked up and quickly dialed a phone number. Boss. That guy Shuyi has left home. That guy, what are you wearing? A fierce voice came from the other end of the phone. He is wearing. The figure looked up and immediately replied to the phone. He is wearing a white shirt and black pants. Damn it, if you grab a random person on the street, he's wearing a white shirt and black trousers, how do you expect me to identify him? Aha, the figure was scolded and frowned in shame. He thought for a moment and suddenly his eyes lit up. By the way, there is something very conspicuous on him that can identify him immediately. What? On his left arm, there is a red cuff. Did you hear everything? In a certain alleyway, a sturdy man wearing a school uniform put down the phone in his hand and looked around. Today, there is a red cuff on the top of Shuyi's left arm. Keep an eye on everyone, don't miss anyone. Yes, boss. Beside him, about 30 students nodded in unison, all of them in high spirits, with the light of revenge shining in their eyes. This is the only way for Shuyi to go to number 3 middle school. After today's graduation ceremony, it will be impossible to see him in school again. The boss squatted on a trash can and shouted with fierce force, we have suffered so much because of Shuyi in the past 3 years. This is our last chance for revenge. I was kicked into a well, mistaken by the police for posting small advertisements, and bitten on the butt by dogs released from the dog market. He clenched his fists angrily and told the history of blood and tears in the past 3 years. In order to knock him down, we victims established the Annihilation Alliance just for today. Oh, the crowd around them was excited, shouting with arms raised, and everyone showed anger. Hey, give me a moment, I have to collect the garbage. Suddenly, a janitor came out from one side and interrupted his pre-war speech with disgust on his face. Oh, I'm sorry. The boss, who was so fierce before, immediately jumped down from the trash can and bowed respectfully, sorry. Suddenly he became a good student. The younger brothers who were watching on the sidelines all complained in their hearts, shocked by the change in the boss's attitude. So, this is our last chance, we must complete our revenge today. The boss turned his head and waved his fist again to encourage the soldiers. HMPH, how can you behave like a straggler? Suddenly, at this moment, an inappropriate snort sounded from one side. More than 30 students immediately stared away, only to find that the person speaking was the janitor who had just taken the garbage bag out of the trash can. Uncle, what do you mean? The boss's face darkened and he immediately looked over. You little kids, you don't even have any cohesion. Each generation is really worse than the last. The uncle threw the garbage bag onto the garbage truck behind him, put his hands behind his back, and suddenly put on a proud posture. I remember when your uncle was in school, everyone fought with hundreds of people from other schools out of loyalty. The scene was much more majestic than yours. Guys like you who have no cohesion, in our time, were not even as good as miscellaneous soldiers. As soon as these words came out, everyone who was a little angry before suddenly showed admiration and looked at the old man. Uncle, please give me some advice. The boss quickly saluted with his fists raised, showing an expression of asking for advice. The uncle lowered his head leisurely, like an expert from outside the world. looked at the respectful boss in front of him, and said calmly, "The so-called cohesion is the force that brings everyone together into one force. How can guys like you, who don't even have a decent logo, be cohesive?" My opponents at that time, except for the cadres, the rest of the boys fought with shaved heads. Logo. The boss frowned in thought, and actually thought that it was true. It's true, we do need something to distinguish our people. If Shu also finds help, it will be troublesome. Snapped. A plastic bag was thrown in front of the boss. He looked up and saw that the cleaner was already pushing the garbage truck away. "This is something I just found. Maybe you can use it." The boss picked up the plastic bag and took a look, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Inside, there was actually a pile of unopened yellow cuffs. "Everyone, put this yellow cuff on your right arm. If Shuyi really finds help by then, this will be a sign that distinguishes us from the other side." Just opposite this alley, in another alley, there were more than 30 social youths in different clothes, all squatting in the corner, staring at the passing crowd with the same fierce expressions. The leader, a coxcombed man, was holding a mobile phone and talking to someone. "Are you sure that bastard Shuyi has a yellow cuff on his right arm?" "Very good." He put down the phone, threw aside the cigarette butt in his mouth, and stood up. "Brothers, please be energetic. That little bastard Shuyi will pass by here soon. Keep an eye on me." He stepped on the cigarette butt viciously and said angrily, "This little bastard brought our Qinglong Hall to pieces 2 years ago. I will never let him go. HMPH, what a shame for stragglers." Suddenly, at this moment, an inappropriate snort sounded from behind this group of social youths. The coxcomb head suddenly turned around and saw a cleaner standing next to the garbage truck with an arrogant face, holding a plastic bag filled with red cuffs in his hand. Well, it should be almost time. Shuyi looked down at the time and muttered to himself. "Hey, you two." He put the phone away, turned to look at the frightened 2 people he tied to the ground, and showed an innocent smile. He squatted down, hugged the 2 of them under his armpits, glanced at them with a smile. "Now, call your boss. As for what to say, you don't need me to teach you, right?" The 2 of them nodded like chickens pecking at rice, not daring to refute at all. Shuyi picked up their mobile phones, quickly dialed the nearest call, and put them both in their ears. As the call was connected, the 2 swallowed and spoke at the same time. "Boss, brother, Shuyi has appeared on the target street." "What?" In the 2 alleyways, the 2 bosses who answered the phone both showed excited smiles. They waved their hands, pointed at the street, and shouted sternly, "Come on, catch Shuyi and take revenge." Boom. There was only a burst of noisy but chaotic footsteps, and more than 60 people from both sides rushed out of the alley and faced each other on the street. Their eyes and attention were instantly focused on the armband on the opponent's arm, and their expressions perked up. The students all wore yellow cuffs on their right arms, and the crowd was excited. On the side of the delinquent youths, their left arms were tied with red cuffs and their expressions were fierce. The eyes of the eldest student here and the rooster head on the other side all lit up, their right hands pointed forward, and they shouted almost in unison, "They must be the helpers Shuyi found. Shu is also among this group of people. Brothers, come on." Dust and smoke were everywhere, and the yells and noises of fighting swept through the entire street. And just on the side of the street, Shuyi put on a lazy expression, holding bread in his mouth, and walked behind the fighting crowd as if he was no one else. Not far away, the cleaner came to him pushing a garbage truck. "Thank you, Uncle Wang." Shuyi took out a 50 yuan dragon coin and handed it to the uncle beside him. Then, both of them stopped and turned to look at the 2 groups of people fighting fiercely under the early morning sun. The 2 of them let out a long sigh of relief and exclaimed in unison, "Young man, you are so full of energy." When Shuyi stepped into the school, he was surrounded by excited classmates. All of them are people who have successfully awakened their abilities on the awakening day, and they are looking forward to today's graduation ceremony. After a day's rest, they all had a corresponding understanding of their abilities. However, most high school students have never learned how to run energy. Therefore, even if they can use their abilities, the effect is very low. At most, it's as good as moving a pebble and blowing up a piece of paper. Their level of mastery of energy is not even close to that of the stone realm. The reason why Shu Yi is able to use his repair hand so skillfully is because he has awakened his ability a few years ago. During this 2-year period, he has been trying to run energy. Although there is no systematic method and the operation method is relatively rough, there is still no problem with its normal use ability. Just when Shu Yi was walking leisurely towards the classroom at the speed of an old man walking, a sneaky figure was leaning towards him cautiously. Shu Yi. When he got close, Wang Pengkai yelled, rushed forward with all his strength, and hugged Shu Yi with both hands. But Shu Yi, who seemed to be unaware of his approach before, took a step to the left the moment he jumped out. Thump. Wang Peng lay face down on the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. I hope you won't call me in such an ambiguous tone next time and plan to do physical things to me. Shu Yekshu looked at his deskmate and couldn't help but complain, I'm worried that other people will misunderstand my sexual orientation. Damn it, how did you find me approaching? Wang Peng got up from the ground, patting the dust on his clothes as if nothing happened, and muttering in his mouth. Next time before you make a sneak attack, try to pick a good angle. Shu Yi pointed to the shadow on the ground and rolled his eyes. Long before Wang Peng approached, he noticed something strange about the shadow under his feet. That's it. Wang Peng tapped the palm of his left palm with his right hand, showing an expression of sudden enlightenment. Staying with a guy like you will really affect my IQ. Shu Yi twitched the corners of his mouth, held his forehead and sighed. Ha 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 ha, Brother Yi, on my way here just now, I seem to see the guys from the Jianyi Alliance fighting with the gangsters from Qinglong Hall. Wang Peng didn't care about Shu Yi's venomous tongue at all, but laughed, got up. Yeah, they were squatting on the road trying to trouble me, so I just let them have a passionate collision. Shu shrugged nonchalantly, not taking it seriously at all. That's awesome. Wang Peng gave a thumbs up and continued laughing. I remember that Qinglong Hall was a pretty bad organization 2 years ago. I didn't expect that in less than 2 months, I would be completely disintegrated by you, Brother Yi. If you hadn't led me astray that day and accidentally broke into their gathering place, I wouldn't have had a conflict with them. Shu Yi glanced sideways at Wang Peng and muttered dissatisfiedly. They just scolded us a few words, but you destroyed their organization. No matter what, it seems that you are more evil-minded. Wang Peng was shocked. He didn't expect that Shu would also throw the blame on himself. Ahem. Shu Yi coughed twice. Thinking about it this way, he did go a bit too far. However, it may not be a bad thing for these unscrupulous young people to disband their organizations and study hard. These are all things that happened when I was young. They are not worth mentioning. They are not worth mentioning. It's obviously only been less than 2 years. Wang Peng complained again, but his expression perked up and he looked at Shu Yi. By the way, Brother Yi, will you test your ability after you go back? When he mentioned his ability, he immediately became excited. After I went back, I checked the information for a long time. The C-level ability I awakened is called Metal Mastery and it's a pretty powerful ability. As he spoke, he spread his palms and stopped with Shu at the door of the teaching building. Faint energy fluctuations gathered in his palm, and after a moment, whoosh, a nail flew out of nowhere and fell into his palm. Did you see it, Brother Yi? Wang Peng grabbed the nail excitedly and showed it to Shu Yi. As long as I activate my ability, I can control the metal around me. Ah, Shu didn't know how to evaluate him, he just looked up at the top of his head. Although Wang Peng only sucked one nail into his hand, it was not easy to activate his ability without knowing how to control energy at all. However, if this ability is cultivated, it does have great potential. Not bad, your ability. Shu Yi spoke softly and was about to make a few comments when the feet of the two of them were suddenly covered by shadows. Turning around, Liao Wei's strong body stood behind the two of them, looking at them with a sneer. Shu Yi, we meet again. Shu Yi and Wang Peng turned around, took a step back, and entered the teaching building. I remember you, you are Yang Wei from class 3 next door. Shu Yi opened his eyes wide, and with lightning-like shrewdness, he immediately recalled the name of the guy in front of him. My name is Liao Wei. Liao Wei's anger surged and he couldn't help roaring, you are the one who nourishes the stomach, and your whole family nourishes the stomach. His roar immediately attracted the attention of the students passing by. Hearing this, they suddenly looked strange and looked at Liao Wei. Some female classmates turned red in the face and hurriedly lowered their heads and ran forward. Hey, classmate Liao Wei. Shu Yi patted his shoulder earnestly and sighed softly, don't be afraid if you get this disease. You must treat it as soon as possible. You are still in high school. If you get treatment early, you still have a chance to find a girlfriend. Liao Wei's temples had veins popping out, and he could only feel the anger rising up. With a dark face, he pressed his knuckles and said with a ferocious smile, I originally planned to challenge you during the graduation ceremony. It seems like you want to fight me now. He had a ferocious expression, and some energy fluctuations emerged from his body. What I have awakened is a B-level ability. Compared with you half-hearted ones, it is much stronger. Wang Peng. Shu Yi suddenly tilted his head and whispered, can the ability you just used be used again? Well, try using it a little toward the right. Oh, although Wang Peng didn't understand what Shu was going to do, he still activated his abilities honestly. The next second, another nail flew rapidly from above his head and landed in his hand. What do you want to do? Let me tell you, Liao Wei frowned and looked at the two of them, continuing to make an incomparably domineering declaration. But then, his head was covered by a shadow. Boom. Ouch. Without the support of two nails, the door number at the door of the teaching building suddenly fell down, knocking Liao Wei to the ground accurately. On the other side, Wang Peng stared dumbly at the two nails in his palm and Liao Wei, who was lying on the ground not far away with the house number on his back. Are these nails from the house number? Beside him, Shu Yi patted his shoulder, turned around and left. This is your ability to activate. If the school wants to compensate you, you can't rely on me. Hey, Brother Yi, you don't bring this kind of thing. Wang Peng wailed with a bitter face and quickly chased after him. After returning to the classroom, Teacher Wang quickly walked in. The classroom that was originally full is now less than half full. Looking at the entire Blue Star, the number of people who can successfully become awakened people only accounts for about 50%. Whether or not one can become an awakened person has been decided as early as birth. As for those who have not awakened, they can only take the normal college entrance examination and contribute to the fight against the virtual demon in other ways. As the graduation ceremony approaches, Teacher Wang also looks quite melancholy. He briefly explained to everyone what should be paid attention to during the graduation ceremony, and soon the time came to 8 o'clock. Okay, students. Teacher Wang stood up from the podium and clapped his hands, let's all gather in the playground. Our graduation ceremony will be held on the playground. Teachers from the 6 awakened colleges came to the school. After the ceremony is over, there will be ability demonstration and interview sessions. If you perform well, you may even have the opportunity to enter without taking the exam. This is another important aspect of the graduation ceremony. In order to recruit capable awakened ones, competition among awakening academies is also quite fierce. So far, there are 20 awakened colleges in Dragon Kingdom. Among them, the top 10 colleges all have hunting teams, which are the colleges that all awakened people dream of. In the academy, you can not only learn basic knowledge, but also hone your combat skills and improve yourself in order to join the Void Hunting team and fight against the Void Demon. Only awakened ones with extremely average combat abilities or those who failed to be selected will choose the last 10 academies to study. Although they did not have the opportunity to directly confront the Void Beasts, most of what they learned was to assist the hunting team in various backup tasks. It is precisely because of the existence of these reserve personnel that the hunting team has been able to persist to this day. The so-called graduation ceremony is not only to bring an end to one's high school life. It is still an interview for those who are awakened. Those who perform well enough in the interview will have the opportunity to enroll directly without taking the exam and join the Academy of Awakeners. Shu Yi and Wang Peng walked out of the classroom and walked slowly towards the playground. He looked around, but secretly thought in his heart, it seems that the virtual demon must have been stopped by them. The students came to the playground in scattered pieces. There were only 110 people attending the graduation ceremony this time, accounting for less than half of the total number of seniors. The rest of the students who were unable to awaken their abilities were all depressed at home, and most of them had not recovered from the awakening day. In the middle of the playground, there were about 20 teachers from various awakened colleges, as well as the principal of No. 3 middle school and the head teachers of each class. They set up tables and chairs on the playground, sat upright, and looked at the students coming and going with serious faces. Shu Yi! A roar came from the distance. Immediately afterwards, Liao Wei galloped from a distance like a stumbling wild boar and stood behind Shu Yi. He was quite embarrassed at the moment, and there was obviously a swollen bump on his head. You guys, why are you going on forever? Shu Yi sighed and frowned slightly. Liao Wei glared at Shu Yi angrily, gritted his teeth and said, I want to challenge you to an awakened duel. As soon as this statement came out, the students around him were in an uproar. Even the teachers from the major awakening colleges sitting not far away, their eyes lit up, and they all stared over with amusement. Mirror world. The houses that were originally mirror images have now collapsed. In this mirror world, the entire urban village seems to have been turned into ruins, with no place intact. The smoke and dust shrouded it, and it was blown away by a strong wind after a while, revealing several figures among them. Night Dyer's arms were drooped in front of him, swinging as if they were dislocated. His whole body was covered in blood, and he was breathing heavily. Opposite him, Cao Sha and Guo Yangxiali were also seriously injured. They surrounded Night Dyer in a triangle shape and slowly adjusted their breath. Is this guy really seriously injured? Guo Yan spat out a mouthful of bloody phlegm and looked forward in disbelief. We have besieged him for so long, and he is still alive and kicking. Don't compare me with those ordinary virtual demons. Nightmare breathed out softly, her arms shrouded in black energy, and she pushed upwards with all her strength. Hearing the sound of bones shifting, he reattached the two dislocated arms and waved them casually. In terms of injuries, I am indeed seriously injured. His tone was calm, but there was a hint of weakness in his eyes, but from an energy perspective, I'm in very good shape. Do you mean that our fight with you only consumed your energy and didn't even hurt you? Sha Li snorted coldly, with a hint of anger in his cold tone. He's right. Cao Sha shook the Tang Dao in his hand to scatter the blood stains on it, and said coldly, since the beginning of the battle, he has been using energy to protect himself. The injuries we caused to him were just some superficial injuries, and they didn't hurt the root at all. It seems that Mr. Captain has a very thorough understanding. Night Dyer smiled lightly and showed the appearance of a gentleman again. You constantly defend and dodge with energy, and then use your own abilities to affect our sanity, but you have never actively launched any fatal attacks. Cao Sha looked directly at Nightmare and asked in confusion, I'm curious, what do you want to do? Yes, what exactly do I want to do? Night Dyer answered the question with a question, showing a weird expression with a half smile, why don't you take a guess, Mr. Captain? The moment he saw this expression, Cao Sha's heart suddenly tightened, and he felt a little uneasy. He suddenly turned his head, looked at Guo Yan, and asked urgently, tell me, how long has it been since we entered the mirror world? How long has it been? Guo Yan was stunned when he heard this. He took out his mobile phone and said in confusion, it must have been at most an hour since we came in. But when he saw the time displayed on his phone, his eyes widened instantly and he exclaimed in disbelief, how is it possible? It's already 8 o'clock in the morning. Is my phone broken? Oops. Cao Sha finally understood where the uneasiness in his heart came from. This guy has used his ability to confuse our concept of time. He's been delaying us here. What? Guo Yan and Sha Li were both shocked, but if they are here, what's the use of delaying our time? It's a void beast. A bright light suddenly flashed in Cao Sha's mind. This guy, let the wolf out. Bingo. Nightmare smiled brightly. Correct answer. The next moment, his smile faded, and several waves of black energy emerged from behind, entwining towards the three of them. Unfortunately, there is no reward. Aha! Cao Sha slashed the Tang Dao in front of him, and the bright sword light instantly chopped the black energy into pieces. Then, he waved his left hand, and two daggers appeared out of thin air and pierced in the direction of Night Dyer. Night Dyer smiled and just stepped back, using up his energy to block the two attacks. Compared to the Void Hunter team that hurt me, you are simply too weak. He stood firmly on the spot and spoke calmly. You must be a team that has only been formed for a short time. Both the numbers and strength are far below my expectations. Let me guess, your last Huxu team died not long ago, right? His words clearly hit Cao Sha's pain point. Anger surged in Cao Sha's eyes, and he rushed in the direction of Nightmare desperately. Sure, Guo Yan also broke free from the shackles of Nightmare's energy at this moment, crossed his hands and shouted loudly. Boom! Nightmare's body seemed to have been hit by a mobilization spell, and it suddenly froze for a moment. But in the next second, he recovered as before, flapped his right palm forward, and faced Cao Sha. For some reason, many phantoms appeared in front of Cao Sha's eyes. He had already been warned about the Night Dyer's ability to disturb his mind, and he immediately concentrated on driving these phantoms out of his mind. But even so, the moment of confusion still caused his original knife to go wrong, and he was slapped away by Nightmare. After Nightmare slapped Cao Sha's attack away, his left hand immediately shot out like a stabbing sword, stabbing into Cao Sha's abdomen. But at this moment, a shield suddenly appeared and stood in front of Cao Sha. However, this shield shattered like a bubble under the attack of Night Dyer that was wrapped in energy. However, Cao Sha took advantage of this moment's pause and used his strength to hold Tang Dao horizontally in front of him. Clang! Boom! The blade trembled, and Cao Sha flew out like a cannonball, smashing through half of the wall in the ruins and raising a cloud of dust. Nightmare looked at the dusty place quietly, smiled and said, "By stepping on the shadow to cast the immobilization technique, you can ignore it just by refracting the light. The power of protection through energy can be penetrated by using energy stronger than it. In my opinion, it's hard for you two little guys from the rock realm to even restrict me. Mr. Captain, these two team members of yours are really useless." Upon hearing this, both Guo Yan and Sha Li's faces paled slightly, and anger emerged in their eyes. Whoosh! Two blasts of wind sounded together, tearing through the dust and approaching Night Dyer's body in an instant. His face changed slightly, and he quickly used energy to deflect the two flying knives and bounce them to both sides of his body. But one of the flying knives still cut through the energy on his body, leaving a blood mark on his face. The flying knife hit the ground and instantly turned into energy and dissipated. And a figure also jumped up from the ruins. "My team member, you are not worthy of giving advice." Cao Sha calmly walked out of the smoke and dust, and a broken wall beside him suddenly collapsed and crashed in his direction. But he just casually waved the knife in his hand, and the broken wall turned into countless fragments, scattered on both sides of his body. Cao Sha's bravery surprised Night Dyer. He smiled lightly and wiped away the blood on his face with his hand, and said, "Mr. Captain, do you really want to fight with me here? My pet is about to go on a killing spree. Even if we want to go out, you will stop us." There was no expression on Cao Sha's face. The Tang Dao in his hand lightly moved on the ground, then he quickly raised it and pointed it at Night Dyer from a distance. "As a void hunter, what I want to do is to kill you here. As for that wolf," he gently raised his left hand and pressed the switch of the headset in his ear. "My team members will do their best to stop it. Senior, why are they so slow?" On the rooftop, Fang Xin yawned and frowned at his feet. Nearly 4 hours have passed since they entered the mirror world. If she hadn't been able to sense their energy fluctuations, she might have rushed in long ago. Can the seriously injured void demon hold off the seniors and the others for so long? As a hunter, you must choose to trust your companions and execute orders perfectly. Because of this, no matter how anxious she was, she had to stick to her post until instructions came from her senior. Suddenly, a burst of electricity came from the headset in her ear. Half a second later, Cao Sha's voice came from the headset, "Fang Xin." His voice was unprecedentedly solemn and dignified. Fang Xin, who was still a little undisciplined at first, immediately condensed his expression, quickly stood up from the top of the building, and pressed the switch of the headset. "Senior, I'm here. The Night Dyer confuses our concept of time and sends out the wolves from the rock realm, preparing to attack the school." Cao Sha's voice sounded in the headset, accompanied by the sounds of fighting. But his tone was extremely calm, and he gave the order firmly. "According to the analysis of that high school boy, rush to the school quickly to protect the people. I order you, no matter what happens, you must protect every citizen and don't let them get hurt. You are alone, but no matter what, we must stop that wolf, even if we pay for it with our lives." Almost as soon as the senior mentioned ganglang, Fang Xin started moving at high speed, quickly shuttled on the roof of the building, and rushed towards the direction of number 3 middle school. After hearing Cao Sha's almost inhumane order, instead of showing any displeasure, her face curved up, The long hair kept flying back as he shuttled rapidly. But Fang Xin's eyes became extremely firm. From the day she became a hunter, she had been ready. She gently pressed her hand on the headset and said calmly, Fang Xin, the Void Hunter, has received the order. I swear on my own life that I will definitely protect all the people and stop that wolf with all my strength. Fang Xin put his feet on the edge of the roof and jumped up towards the empty front. It was early morning, the sun was shining brightly, and there were no clouds in the sky. Just below her feet, countless office workers were walking on the road, and the traffic was busy. People's faces are filled with smiles and full of expectations for tomorrow. I will not let anyone destroy this peaceful world. Boom! Fang Xin's body suddenly jumped out and was instantly enveloped in red energy. The next moment, she was like a rapidly falling meteor, exploding at an extremely terrifying speed and disappearing in midair in an instant. Duel of the Awakened. This is a special challenge between awakened people using abilities. At the graduation ceremony, the awakened ones can not only show their abilities to the teachers of the major awakened academy. You can also express yourself through duels. As long as no one is hurt, this kind of duel is still supported by the teachers. After all, these children may go to fight virtual beasts and demons in the future. Only by accumulating combat experience in advance can casualties be reduced. As soon as Liao Wei's words of challenge to Shu Yi came out, countless eyes suddenly came from all around. Where the two of them stood immediately became the focus of the playground. Alas, women are really a disaster. Faced with Liao Wei's provocation, Shu Yi sighed helplessly and shrugged his shoulders. Just because I wanted to show my manhood in front of Tang Xiaowen, I impulsively challenged me to a duel. Classmate Zhang Wei, you are too childish. My name is Liao Wei. Liao Wei gritted his teeth and said with even more anger in his eyes. After hearing Tang Xiaowen's name, he was obviously panicked for a moment, and he snorted angrily, I just see that you are unhappy, what does it have to do with Tang Xiaowen? Among the crowd, a pair of beautiful eyes swept over. Xiaowen, it looks like your suitor is over there. Beside her, a rather lively girl said with a smile. What a suitor, don't talk nonsense, Xiao Yu. Tang Xiaowen's voice was very gentle, with a look of helplessness on his face. Beside her and her best friend, dozens of pairs of eyes kept scanning. The two of them are almost the most eye-catching presence on the playground. But Tang Xiaowen's eyes stayed on Shu Yi's face, and a picture immediately appeared in his mind, and his ears turned slightly red. Last week, she accidentally fell off the flag-raising platform and was rescued by Shu Yi, who was passing by. She has never been in contact with the opposite sex, and she can never forget what happened at that time. What impressed her most was Shu Yi's expression as if he had seen the god of plague. Before she could even say thank you, Shu Yi threw her to the ground and ran out quickly. That guy is also a famous figure. Xiao Yu, a lively girl next to her, continued to smile and said, I don't know why, but many boys in our class are chanting his name every day. Every time I mentioned it, I would say some horrible words like, kill, and, annihilate. Shu Yi, Tang Xiaowen said the name softly, his eyes flickering, and he didn't know what he was thinking. At the same time, most of the students have arrived on the playground, and every student is smiling, looking forward to the upcoming graduation ceremony. And just above the school, a mass of mist wrapped in black energy was constantly deforming and rotating in the air, as if waiting for something. Suddenly, a black light circulated in the mist. The next moment, the mist seemed to have received an order, and a wolf howl came from it. Then, the mist began to surge and began to expand crazily. The wolf's shadow kept flashing in the mist, roaring from time to time, and its energy began to rise rapidly. The change above the head was not noticed by anyone. On the playground, the students were still enjoying themselves, looking at Shu Yi and Liao Wei with smiles. Liao Wei suddenly became a little angry again when he saw that Shu Yi was still looking careless. He said fiercely, Shu Yi, are you afraid? Faced with his provocation, Shu Yi rubbed his brows helplessly and said calmly, originally, graduation was approaching, so I planned to stay calm and not cause any more trouble. But if you pester me again and again, then I can only. His voice stopped suddenly, he raised his head suddenly, and his expression changed drastically. The next moment, Liao Wei didn't react at all, and was kicked out by Shu Yi. Get down quickly. Shu Yi's roar sounded from the playground, and he immediately leaned down. Wang Peng, who was beside him, believed his words deeply, and without any hesitation, he directly put his head in his hands and lay on the ground. Shu Yi, you unexpectedly attacked me, Liao Wei's body rolled twice on the ground, half of his body climbed up with surging energy and blood, and his mouth was filled with shock and anger. But before he could finish his words, a terrifying beam of light suddenly fell from midair, like a laser, and quickly swept across the ground. The fiery energy melted the rubber floor of the playground. A long ravine appeared on the playground, burning everything above it. Boom! Liao Weisai got up and collapsed directly on the ground, with horror in his eyes. If Shu hadn't kicked him away just now, at this moment, he might have been incinerated by that beam of light. The surging air flow blew from all around the gully, blowing the clothes of Shu Yi and Wang Peng, who were lying low next to them. Fortunately, among the misfortunes, except for the three of them, there was no one else around the beam of light, and no casualties were caused. Shu Yi suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction from which the light beam came. A huge body nearly 3 meters high fell from the sky and suddenly stepped on the playground. It was a giant wolf with black hair all over its body. Its eyes were fierce, pitch black energy lingered around the body, the wolf's mouth was wide open, and there was a bit of smoke surging in the mouth. In the center of its forehead, half a purple crystal was buried. Under the light, it glowed slightly with purple light, making it look even more fierce. Many people on the playground noticed this strange change. After looking back and seeing the wolf, they all screamed and shouted in terror. They scattered, running wildly away from the wolf. The teachers from the major awakened academies who were originally sitting on the playground all jumped up in fright. Regardless of the tables and chairs they knocked over, they said in shock, "The virtual beast of the rock realm, the Ganglang. Why would there be a virtual beast here? Although they are from the awakened academy. But they are not combatants, nor are they void hunters. They have almost no experience fighting void beasts." One of the teachers' expression changed drastically, but he immediately squatted down and put his hand on the ground. In an instant, 4 thick vines immediately rose up from under the virtual beast's feet, wrapping around its 4 legs. After doing all this, he immediately roared and spoke, and the sound spread in all directions. "This is a virtual beast in the rock realm. I can't stop it for long. Everyone, run away. Why does the void beast appear here?" Shu Yi was also very anxious at this moment, and his brain was spinning rapidly. Did those guys fail to find the virtual demon? No, that's not right. If that's the case, it should be the virtual demon that attacks here, not this wolf. Without excessive hesitation, he directly grabbed the frightened Wang Peng from the ground and shouted at him, "Run!" Wang Peng only reacted at this moment, and immediately yelled and ran out in the opposite direction. Shu did not follow him immediately. Instead, he crossed the ravine and came not far away, grabbing Liao Wei, whose legs were weak. "What are you doing standing still? Run!" Liao Wei was still in a state of panic and fear. At this moment, under Shu Yi's roar, he finally came back to his senses. He widened his eyes and looked at Shu Yi with a complicated expression. He finally pursed his lips and ran forward with his head down. The virtual beast in the rock realm, the people here are definitely no match for it. Although Shu Yi looked anxious, he was extremely calm inside. The only thing they can do now is to take advantage of the gap between Ganglang's restraint and escape quickly to reduce casualties as much as possible. At this moment, the students and the teachers from the Awakened Academy were all running away, and no one dared to stay in front of this terrifying virtual beast. Just as Shu was also preparing to escape, behind him, there suddenly came an urgent cry. "Xiaoyu, are you okay?" Shu also turned around. Among the scattered crowd, Tang Xiaowen squatted on the ground anxiously and helped his friend up. Shu Yi knew that girl. She was Ni Xiaoyu, who was in the same class as Tang Xiaowen. The two had a very good relationship and stayed together almost every day. But at this moment, Ni Xiaoyu's face was full of panic. He accidentally twisted his foot and fell to the ground. Fear and terror flashed in her eyes, and she tried to stand up several times, but her body couldn't muster any strength at all. Click, click, there was the sound of vines snapping in the distance. Shu Yi's pupils condensed, and he soon noticed that the vines that had previously wrapped around Ganglang's legs could no longer support its strength and began to break inch by inch. Several boys passing by Tang Xiaowen's eyes lit up, and they headed in her direction, trying to save the beauty heroically. But at this moment, a terrifying wolf howl sounded from behind them. The sharp sound wave directly made their souls fly into the sky. At this moment, they couldn't care less about saving the beauty. They all looked frightened and ran forward without looking back. Within a few seconds, all the students behind Tang Xiaowen ran in front of her. Many people fell to the ground because they were panicking, but the people passing by did not choose to help them. They all stood up on their own, regardless of their physical injuries, and continued running forward. At this moment, almost everyone is thinking only about their own safety. Tang Xiaowen's body continued to tremble, and he was obviously very frightened. At this moment, she could leave her friends behind and run away. But her eyes remained firm, and she grabbed Ni Xiaoyu's arm and tried to pick her up. "Xiaoyu, hold on, let's run." Xu Yi took this scene in his eyes, and the memory of the scene 3 years ago seemed to be reflected in his eyes at this moment. Uncle, run quickly. Auntie, take your daughter and get out of here. Are you okay? Don't stop. The girl in the white dress is like an elf, constantly moving through the crowd. Even though there was a terrifying monster approaching behind her, she did not choose to escape alone, but continued to help everyone in front of her who was in trouble. Why are there so many idiots in the world? The flashback of the memory passed by in a flash, and Xu Yi ran back against the crowd without saying a word. He also exercised regularly, and his skills were relatively strong. He arrived in front of Tang Xiaowen in a few steps. Tang Xiaowen looked up, her expression trembling, and it was a bit unbelievable that in such a crisis, there was still someone willing to come back to help her. Xu Yi didn't say any nonsense. He pulled Tang Xiaowen up with one hand, and then pulled Ni Xiaoyu up from the ground with one hand. "What are you doing standing still?" he roared at Ni Xiaoyu, who was still in fear. "Run and don't look back. If you don't want to die, you have to keep running even if your foot is broken." His roar forcefully brought out Ni Xiaoyu's survival consciousness. She stood on the ground with great reluctance, shouted, and actually staggered forward. Roar! The howl of the wolf was getting closer and closer, and the huge figure of the ganglang crossed more than 10 meters in a few steps, leaving only less than 20 meters away from the three of them. Tang Xiaowen took a deep look at Xu Yi and understood that the situation was critical. He quickly turned around, quickly grabbed Ni Xiaoyu's arm, and led her to run quickly forward. Xu Yi watched the two people running, and without any hesitation, he ran quickly in the other direction. In the blink of an eye, only the three of them were left in the entire school playground. The sound of ganglang's heavy stomping on the ground was like an earthquake, causing the ground to tremble continuously. It shuttled rapidly across the ground on all four legs, and actually caught up with it at an extremely fast speed. The wolf's eyes flashed with bloodthirsty light, and it aimed directly in the direction of Tang Xiaowen and Ni Xiaoyu. Both of their faces were pale, and when they felt the surging airflow behind them, their hearts skipped a beat and they were horrified. But at this moment, a sound of breaking wind sounded quickly. Half of the bricks fell straight on Ganglang's face. "You idiot!" Xu Yi stood in the other direction and yelled, then ran without looking back. Ganglang roared, unable to bear this provocation. He turned around, abandoned Tang Xiaowen and Ni Xiaoyu, and rushed in the direction of Xu Yi. Xu Yi continued to shuttle under the fitness equipment next to the playground and ran quickly towards the teaching building. He could feel the turbulent air coming from behind, but his face was stern. He was holding something tightly in his right hand, and calculating the speed and distance in his heart. Ganglang's speed is extremely fast, and his whole body is like a runaway train, running rampant on the playground. Those iron single and parallel bars were directly knocked away by it, scattered to both sides, and rushed towards Xu Yi without losing any speed. The top of Xu Yi's head was covered by shadow, and from the corner of his eye, he could even see the white fangs. Even from this distance, he could smell the extremely fishy smell from Ganglang's mouth. Seeing that the fangs were about to hit him and bite his body into pieces, Xu Yi finally flashed his eyes and waved his fist hard. In the palm of his hand, a white thread quickly shuttled out and quickly connected to the broken horizontal bar behind him. The next moment, his body seemed to be pulled, and he flew backwards at a speed faster than the bite of a wolf. The development of abilities is endless. As long as you have a sufficient understanding of your own abilities, you can produce completely different effects. Shu also tested the ability of the repair hand for a day, and what he was using now was one of its effects. Use the object with energy attached to it as the starting point to repair it. Just now, while he was running, he attached half of the horizontal bar with his own energy and removed half of the loose iron pieces. At this moment, after using his ability, he himself will be pulled by the half piece of iron and returned to the repaired horizontal bar. Boom! Shu Yi's body grabbed the horizontal bar and was dragged back by the inertia. Not far away, Gang Lang pounced, stepped on the ground with all 4 feet in time, and turned around with a drift. Then, he opened his mouth, and a beam of light shot out from his mouth, heading straight towards Shu Yi. Faced with this pure energy attack, Shu Yi couldn't avoid it. A bitter smile appeared on his face and he murmured, "I didn't expect that I would do something as stupid as you. It seems that I am also a hopeless fool." His eyes were calm, and he knew he could not avoid it, so he greeted the upcoming attack with incomparable calm. But at this moment, 3 red lights flew from behind him and crashed directly into the breath released by Gang Lang. Immediately afterwards, a familiar shout sounded from behind him. "Don't be dazed, hold on to the horizontal bar in front of you." This voice was extremely familiar to Shu Yi. Without thinking, he firmly grasped the horizontal bar in front of him. Immediately afterwards, a sound of snapping fingers sounded behind him. The explosion exploded right in front of him, and the terrifying air wave almost blew Shu Yi's entire body away. If he hadn't grabbed the horizontal bar in time, he might have flown out at this moment. This sudden explosion surprised Gang Lang and he couldn't help but let out a low roar. Shu Yi's arms were numb. He didn't let go of his arms until the strong wind dissipated. "I didn't expect that a heartless guy like you would almost die trying to save others." Fang Xin fell from the sky, stood in front of Shu Yi, and chuckled. Today, she is not wearing that JK skirt, but is wearing a black long trousers. The waist is slightly tight, which outlines her figure. From the appearance point of view, she is quite heroic. "You actually saw it." Shu Yi panted slightly and spoke a little speechlessly. "Yes, I saw what happened here a few hundred meters away. Fortunately, I caught up in time." Fang Xin looked straight ahead, facing Gang Lang's eyes, and his momentum continued to rise. "But I should thank you." "Thank me?" Shu Yi was a little confused. "Yes." Fang Xin took a deep breath, took out a hair tie from his arms, and gently put it on his hand. "I want to thank you for not letting my promise fall through." The breeze blew her hair up, and she smoothed her long hair down and tied it into a ponytail so that it would no longer dangle randomly. Then, the fighting spirit rose in her eyes. She made fists with her hands, moved forward and backward, and assumed a fighting posture. "From now on, I will do my best to stop it and won't let anyone get hurt by it. Kid, I want to let you know personally what it means to be a true hunter of voids." This heroic appearance made Shu Yi a little stunned, but his expression soon changed slightly and he shouted urgently, "Be careful." Not far away, Gang Lang finally couldn't hold himself back anymore, stepped on all 4 legs, and rushed towards Fang Xin with a terrifying momentum. Shu Yi's face looked a little solemn. When he looked forward, he found that Fang Xin was not moving at all and had no idea of dodge. "Are you crazy?" he shouted, trying to make Fang Xin avoid the blow. But a smile appeared on Fang Xin's lips. "I don't have to worry about being exposed today." The next moment, a scene that shocked Shu Yi appeared. Faced with Gang Lang coming to attack him, Fang Xin flew up, completed a roundhouse kick with astonishing speed, and kicked Gang Lang hard in the face with his right foot. Gang Lang's body only froze for half a second, and then his huge body was kicked out. Boom! Its body hit the playground, it let out a low howl, and then quickly turned over. A look of shock and anger flashed in its eyes. Shu Yi was stunned and looked at Fang Xin in shock. Void hunters don't fight solely by ability. Fang Xin landed lightly and laughed. The practice of physical skills can even overturn the gap in ability level. She glanced back at Shu Yi and shouted in an unquestionable tone, "Get out of here quickly, don't stay here. Evacuate people near the school as soon as possible and let them." Before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by a deafening roar. The Gang Lang opened its huge mouth and the sound shook all directions. From its feet, 4 masses of black energy spread out like a tide. In a matter of seconds, these black energies surrounded the school, as if it had turned into an energy barrier. This is. Fang Xin's face showed a look of shock. A-level ability, Colosseum. Void beasts actually have abilities. Shu Yi's expression changed slightly and he quickly looked around. The school at this moment was wrapped in half a sphere of black energy, covering the entire campus like a pot lid. Almost all the teachers and students in the distance who tried to leave the school were blocked by this energy. They hit the energy hard, but were bounced away one after another. They could only slap the barrier in front of them in panic, looking panicked. Except for a few people who relied on their agile bodies or abilities to escape from the campus before the barrier unfolded. The remaining more than 100 people are trapped in the school. According to the information and data, not only virtual beasts, but also virtual demons have abilities. Fang Xin looked at the barrier that enveloped the surroundings, his expression extremely solemn. The A-level ability Colosseum can shroud a certain range in a barrier. It is a domain law type ability. This domain cannot be destroyed unless the person using the ability actively removes the ability, or the person with the ability dies. Otherwise, people inside the Colosseum will never be able to escape. This guy wants to kill everyone in the school. Roar! Gang Lang activated his ability and stepped heavily on the ground with his right foot. On the playground, he suddenly stepped into a huge pit, and his wolf eyes flashed fiercely, staring at Fang Xin. Then, it suddenly stepped out and rushed directly in front of Fang Xin. So fast, Shu Yi's pupils shrank, and he clearly felt that Ganglang's speed had increased a lot. Obviously, in this Colosseum, its speed and strength have improved. Boom! Although Fang Xin put his arms in front of him in time to protect himself, he was still knocked away by Ganglang's claw. She quickly stabilized her figure in the air, threw out 3 fruit knives from her arms with her right hand, and dropped them quickly in a pin shape. Boom! The fire spread, and the blast of air covered Ganglang's body. However, within half a second, a blazing energy beam emerged from the airwaves and struck into the air. Fang Xin twisted her body in time, and the beam passed through her body closely and accurately hit a teaching building behind her. Boom! A corner of the teaching building was directly shattered by the beam. The shattered teaching building exploded into a lot of rubble, turning into countless hard stones falling downwards. There was an uproar among the students near the teaching building, and they fled in panic. Stones fell from the sky, and a student couldn't dodge. He fell to the ground with a pale face and looked above his head in despair. Fortunately, a teacher from the Academy of Awakeners reacted in time, shouted angrily, grew a bit bigger, rushed over quickly, smashed the stone with a punch, and saved the student. Fang Xin looked into the distance nervously. It was not until she saw that the student was rescued that she breathed a sigh of relief. But soon, she showed her anger and turned to glare at Ganglang, who walked out of the smoke. How could I let you destroy this place so wantonly? As she spoke, she took out 4 yellow talismans from her arms. She held the yellow talisman in her hand and threw it hard. 3 yellow talismans suddenly shot out and fell rapidly in 4 directions. She took out the last yellow talisman and pressed it firmly against her feet. This time, she bit her fingertips without hesitation and smeared the blood on the yellow talisman. The Mirror World, Kai. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe.